Yeah, hello everybody to this week's growth call. We will focus in this discussion today on the Bisq DAO. If you're not familiar with the Bisq DAO, please read up our documentation, which is posted below in the links. And we have done an earlier video about giving an overview about the DAO from the conceptual side. And so if you're not familiar, please maybe look at this video first, because we are not repeating in this discussion all the basics and all the overview. And I invited Eyal, who helped a lot with the conceptual discussion and design and the review about the DAO. And we will have a hopefully interesting discussion about the DAO, and I would like to start with asking him why he is interested and what he thinks it makes the DAO special and worth to contribute. So I hand over the discussion basically to Neumann and leave it to what you want to discuss.
So hi, my friend. I apologize for not having a video. I completely destroyed my camera a few days ago. Yeah, so the DAO. I think that I'm curious in general about DAOs since a long time, because I like privacy, because I don't like to be observed, and I like decentralization because I had problems with big organizations like too often. So in my holy grail of the internet, we would have a complete private internet, like that I can choose really easily to make an action online which is won't be connected to my human identity. But I'm also aware that every coin have two sides, and if everybody are anonymous and private, then it's really difficult to collaborate with people, because in real life, if I do something with somebody and they screw me over or cheat or something, and it's connected to their human identity, I can go to court and I can sue them, and there is like some kind of a repercussion to what they did. But in private settings, it doesn't exist. So I think in the last 10 years, we kind of solved the problem of interacting in private settings in exchanging assets. So that's Bitcoin, and also in very sophisticated exchange of assets, which is smart contracts, which allow like options and features tradings and stuff like this. But we are still a bit behind when it comes to collaborating between anonymous people. And for me, this is what I care about DAOs. DAOs, I mean, organization in general is a group of people collaborating together towards a common goal. And DAO is a way for me to do it in private settings, such that I can collaborate with people who I don't know who they are, but I also somehow can have a trust that they cannot violate the terms we agreed on. And then the Bisq DAO, because I mean, I'm curious about DAO since a long time, and I think that Bitcoin is a DAO, but Bitcoin is a DAO with a very specific goal, which is quite simple, and also very simple incentive models, such that people don't cheat each other. BitTorrent is a DAO. I mean, in my view, but in BitTorrent there is not so much for people to cheat one another besides some civil attack. Ethereum had DDAO, and they also have now Aragon and probably some other DAOs that I'm not familiar with. And I think that DAOs on Ethereum are possible to make technically, so it's a complicated engineering task. But eventually, I think they save a lot of the DAO data on the Ethereum, and I think that because of blockchain scaling issues, every time that I looked at one of those, I was not too optimistic at the really chances that it will be used. And then when I heard about the Bisq DAO, it was in a lecture about a year ago, they were using, I mean, we are using now, I guess, the Bitcoin blockchain. So it means that you cannot really save data on the blockchain, and I got very curious about it. I'm a very skeptic person and sometimes annoying, so I went to somebody that I know who was involved in it, and I started to kind of grill him, asking him like for I think like 45 minutes, asking him questions. How is this done? How is this done? Until eventually he asked me, hey, maybe you want to join and see how it's done. And yeah, I've been making comments on the conceptual design since then, which is a bit more than a year now. And when we speak about the Bisq DAO, I think that the first interesting thing about it is that it does more general thing than Bitcoin. So it's not for exchanges, it's for more complicated actions. And then we spoke yesterday, Manfred, like which actions does it do, but maybe you can say like which functions right now are being done by the Bisq and which functions, what is the core functions that you think that the Bisq DAO can do? I mean, I know that there is already a demo. What does the demo do?
Yeah, also the reasons why we implemented this DAO and the core functions and the most important things for Bisq is the decentralized issuance for contributors, so that contributors have a mean to earn money when they are working on Bisq in a decentralized way and a permissionless way.
So basically, I'm just happy about this issue. The idea was that unlike Bitcoin, we don't know how to do automatic. I mean, we don't know how to do automatic issuance of coins because we don't know like how much we need every time, and then we need a more sophisticated.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, usually like in Counterparty or so, you have somebody clicking a button, and then you need a foundation, and at the end you have always a centralized structure where some leaders of the projects decide who get paid and doing the management, and of course you can make it you can improve this a little bit with have a non-profit organization, whatever, but we wanted to get it really decentralized. And we designed this solution where the contributors, they act a little bit like a miner in Bitcoin. So when they have the authority from the BSQ stakeholders, which will be done by voting, then they have the right to issue new tokens. Like a Bitcoin miner has the right to create new Bitcoin when he found a new block, and the network is verifying this, of course. And on the other side, the burning, also to close the economic model. The issuance are creating new tokens all the time, so it creates an inflationary pressure, and then the burning of tokens, which is a way how we are distributing the value or the fees. Also, the traders, they can choose to use BSQ for paying the trading fee, and they're doing it by destroying BSQ tokens, and with that they are basically distributing those tokens to all stakeholders, because every unit of a token has a little bit more value when there is lower supply of tokens by burning. So that's the counterpart. That's the deflationary side. The more people or the more traders using BSQ for trading, for paying the trading fee, the more tokens get burned, and the total supply of tokens is lower, and by that every unit of a token has a little bit more value. And related to that, also the decision how much a contributor should get paid is done basically by voting, and this voting is also implemented on the Bitcoin blockchain, but always in connection with our peer-to-peer network. So we're using the Bitcoin blockchain basically mainly for a notary function to commit a hash of other data, and then to have the verification that this data is correct and has happened at a certain time. But we are not storing more complex data on the blockchain because that's
I think yesterday, I mean, already actually a few times we spoke about like a second layer solution, and maybe we speak about a bit later, more a bit later. So maybe to compare it again for the Bitcoin issuance. In Bitcoin, there are the miners. They kind of issue the coins, and here we have the contributors that issue the coins.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. And in Bitcoin, you have, of course, a mathematical function with checking for this hash with the certain properties to be verified for a miner to create a new block, because when it has a certain amount of zeros at the beginning, when it complies with the difficulty requirements. and you can do this trustlessly, mathematically, but to decide how much a contribution is worth for the project, that's, yeah, you cannot do by
that's a human decision.
Exactly, and we bring in, that's for me a very important part. I mean, a lot in this cryptocurrency space is about getting out the human of the equation and removing it, because yeah, they're unreliable and you have always trust problems and whatever. But I think more complex tasks and more important tasks, especially also when it bridges to the traditional world, when it's not only completely in cyberspace, then at the end you need the human. And I think we can use, and we should use, the human creativity and flexibility to extend the possibilities of such systems, and to build incentive systems or consensus systems which are taking human behavior and working with economic incentives. It's like in Bitcoin itself, there is a lot of game theoretical elements that Bitcoin works. And with creating such systems, you are enabling much more like you could do when you would only use cryptography and code execution. And
so I agree. In general, I think automation is heartless. So it's really good for some things, but you don't have automated justice. So
exactly, and I think
you can never have in court. A judgment can always have like his own opinion about stuff, and he must not take the law as it's written.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's very important to not get in a direction where these machines are becoming, that we are becoming slaves of those machines, like in Kafkaesque novels, where
you become philosophical.
Where you get lost in bureaucracy. I mean, classical bureaucracy are such machineries where everything goes by law, and when these laws are not perfect and cannot deal with certain cases, or there are some bugs and mistakes, then you're a slave and you get killed basically by these machineries. So I think we have to always keep in mind that they should serve us and not we should serve them.
Yeah, so let me ask two more questions about the issuing. Comparing to Bitcoin, I think something that people that I speak with were a bit worried about. One of them is that we let the Bisq members, so that the contributors, to decide how many tokens are being created. And when you tell to people who come from Bitcoin and they think that if you let the miners to decide how much reward they get, the miners will just get like infinite reward each block. So I'm aware that we have mechanisms against it, but I want you to tell about it, because that's one point which is a bit dangerous in this format.
But unlike like in Bitcoin, where it's decided automatically, in the Bisq DAO, it's decided by voting, and the voting, of course, is this human decision where people will not agree when somebody make a compensation request for way too much money, then they will just reject it. And at the end, it's very difficult. I mean, the way how you build so decentralized systems, I think a main element is always that you put all the responsibility to the actor himself. Like here, the contributor himself is the issuer, not some whatever Bisq or entity or whatever. The contributors doing the issuance, and the other contributors or stakeholders, they are the voters. They are deciding over this. And who should say what's the value of your contribution? You are the expert of your contribution, and you're the best to make a suggestion. And of course, it has to be authorized by the stakeholders if they're willing to invest money in you, and that's the voting process. So I think, I think for this model, it's just.
No, I think it's for this model. I mean, we are okay, because we kind of limit the amount of coins that can be issued each time. Eventually, there is a limit, right? Or if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there will be a minimum and maximum. Also, we have this issuance periods in cycles, which are roughly 1 month. And in such an issuance, there's a limit on the amount what you can issue, but that's more for security reasons when there would be a bug to that damage.
And then I think that if all the contributors conspire together, they can basically issue this maximum, but Since it will kind of destroy the reliability of Bisq, we go with the same Bitcoin model, assuming that they don't want to destroy the economic basis on which they are standing. So they should pay salary fairly.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically a limitation of the whole system. So when the majority of the project or of the stakeholders, and when we talk here about the stakeholders or voting, it's not only stake-based, it's meritocratic-based. So 2/3 of the influence about voting comes from meritocracy, which means that what you have earned in the past, this will be added automatically to your voting weight. So when you have, for instance, earned over the last year 100,000 BSQ, and you have only 20,000 BSQ in your wallet, and you use then the 20,000, then all in all, you are voting with 120,000 BSQ. So when somebody wants to compete with this much weight, and he's new, he has never worked on Bisq, he only has voted on the market, he needs to buy 120,000 BSQ on the market to have the same voting weight, which is much harder. Like when we would only take the stake and you have only 20,000 in your wallet, then somebody who buy 20,000 BSQ on the market will have the same influence as you, as a contributor who has already worked a year and knows a lot about the details and so on.
Yeah, I mean, so I love this. I love this contribution system. The fact that only people who did something for Bisq can vote, and the more you did in the past, the more you can vote. It's kind of a reputation system.
Yeah, it's not completely correct. So every stakeholder can vote. So you can vote by buying some BSQ on the market, and quite a small amount required for paying a small fee. But your influence will be probably much lower, like somebody who has worked on the project. And with that, we are protecting more against this majority attack. So when the majority, not only by stake, but also from this merit, also when the people who have built the project and have earned the most, when they are acting stupidly and making completely unethical decisions or whatever, okay, then they will probably destroy and Bisq probably as well. And somebody will fork the project and start over again. So it's actually an insurance against abuse. And and it can be, I mean, there can be complicated situations like it was with Ethereum, the DAO, and then the bailout with the hard fork. And of course, there have been some arguments for some reasons why to do this bailout. It's not a completely non-brainer decision, but of course, for many people, they made a wrong decision, and that led at the end to the Ethereum Classic fork. So when there are situations where the main stakeholders, including this meritocratic aspect, are acting in a way which is very controversial, then the risk for a fork is big. And I think that's a feature, because it's probably then good that there is an alternative system where other people who don't agree, when there's basically not enough consensus, social consensus, then there can be an alternative version of the Bisq DAO or the Bisq itself. And with being everything open source and transparent, the costs for making such a fork is much lower, like with a traditional company, like when you want to fork Google or Facebook, good luck. Here it's mainly the network effect. I mean, of course, it's also not simple to fork Bisq, to get the traders and all this, to get this network and the reputation and all this. But when there are strong reasons, like we have seen with Ethereum Classic, it can work and it can be successful to a certain extent, at least. And I think it's. So,
I mean, let's see, because if you fork Bisq, I mean, Bisq is not only the tokens; it's also the social media and the GitHub, the code, and it's a lot of stuff. And then another thing that I know which we want to do with the Bisq is not only compensation; it's also bonding for rules in the Bisq organization, right?
Yeah, exactly. Also, there are certain roles in the Bisq DAO, also in the Bisq organization, which cannot be decentralized, because they are tied to traditional infrastructures, like holding the domain name or holding the GitHub account. There, you cannot distribute this. I mean, maybe there in future there are some models with kind of like multi-sig or whatever, but even then you're distributing it to a small group. A little bit like in Bitcoin, there's a group of kind of core contributors who have merge rights, commit rights. but it's still a little bit problematic. And to secure, we still cannot distribute this. Maybe in future there will be maybe some kind like technical infrastructure to distribute.
Services for distributed organizations.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're working on something like this, where basically like their access, like a decentralized two-factor authentication away, and where you can lose access when the majority would vote against you and kick you out, then you don't have access to GitHub anymore. And but we're not so far yet. Yeah, but at the moment we can improve it by putting up a bond. A bond is basically like a security deposit. So everybody who holds a role in the Bisq organization, which is a trusted role where he could create some damage and which cannot be meaningful decentralized at the moment, he need to log in some BSQ. The amount of this BSQ should be should represent the maximum damage what he can create. And this money is basically similar like in a multisig. It's locked in, he cannot touch it. And when in the meantime, as long as this is locked in, and when he wants to log out, there is a certain time period, so which can be defined. So like, for instance, when you become an arbitrator of the Bisq, in Bisq, you have to log in something like 100,000 or 200,000 BSQ for minimum 3 months. As for 3 months, when you unlock, it still will stay locked for 3 months. That has the meaning when you violate your rule that you become corrupt and do any harm with this role, then the stakeholders, the BSQ stakeholders, or anybody could make a request for confiscating your bond. And then when the stakeholders vote with a very high percentage, like 85%, for confiscation, when it's very clear that you have violated your duties, your role, then you lose your bond and you have lost your money. And that's why we need this unlock time, because when you're an arbitrate, then make a scam, and then you are making very quickly your unlocking, and the voting needs time and the investigation needs time. So we need sufficient time that the community or the stakeholders can react and can, in the worst case, confiscate your bond. And that should create an additional security that those people are not violating their trusted role. And this bond is actually a very, very powerful feature, because with this bonding we can build our future systems, which we hopefully don't get lost now into discussing this. But one very concrete idea is I just mentioned it very quickly. As a off-chain trade protocol, as a current trade protocol, has some limitations and some problems. For instance, privacy on the blockchain and the transaction fees. At some point in future, the Bitcoin transaction fee will become very high, and other issues. And by using those bonds, we can build an off-chain trade protocol. So that's rough. Yeah, that's midterm planned. It's not very concrete yet, but I think it's feasible to do this. And there might be some other systems possible as well, like for instance a decentralized option trading platform, because this bonding that's another feature. Also this burning, I'm jumping now. Also the other feature, by what we use for the fee payment, the burning of tokens, which is basically an uncoloring of the BSQ back to Bitcoin, and by that it loses its value from the BSQ value, which is much higher, like the underlying Bitcoin Satoshi value. Combining this burning with issuance and having some contract in between, which makes the decision if you have the right to issue or not, is a form of transaction, or you can see it as a form of transaction. So for instance, when we both enter some form of contract, and it takes some time that these contracts get evaluated and executed, and we need to lock in some our money that we are committing to the contract, we can both burn some money, some BSQ, and then at a certain point, which is defined in the contract, and the contract get executed by the Bisq DAO, it's just Java code at the end. And yeah, when the contract gets executed, and then the result of the contract is that, for instance, I should get the money, what we have burned, then I have the right to issue new BSQ. So and that's this, for instance, this idea about option trading protocol, where we both put in 1,000 BSQ. We make a bet basically on the Bitcoin price. Then 1 month later, when the contract time has triggered, the one who has won the bet has the authority and the right to issue 2,000 BSQ to himself. And for the network, it doesn't matter. It's the same. It's a zero cost game. So first, they have been destroyed 2,000 BSQ, 1,000 from me and 1,000 from you. And then 1 month later, somebody has created 2,000 BSQ. So for the network, the balance is zero, or the balance change is zero. But we have basically transferred 1,000 BSQ from my side or from your side, to the other peer. And the contract which defines who should get the payout is much more flexible, like it would be possible on the Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin scripting system. That's very limiting. For instance, you can look up other transactions where for instance, the Bitcoin price is.
You speak up now about lots of other actions that we can do with the same tools that we do for the Bisq DAO, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm getting already lost. I just want to mention that
options tradings and general smart contracts or contracts and stuff like that. But maybe we should speak about the tools.
Yeah,
because I mean, bonding is only one of them, but the Bisq actually have quite many other tools. So I think the most boring tool for the Bisq is the colored coins, which is a token. This is just managed as a token on Bitcoin. I think not many things excited about it. But then the exciting part is the off-chain part.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the way, the important thing, what's required to make all this possible is to have some second layer, this peer-to-peer network, what we have in Bisq already, for transporting the metadata, the additional data, the complex data, what you need. For instance, making a compensation request, you have to define some extra data. It's not only a hash or whatever, but the hash is only the hash of this data which gets distributed in the peer-to-peer system. And we are not abusing the Bitcoin blockchain and bloating the Bitcoin blockchain with storing a lot of data, which is only relevant for the Bisq DAO participants.
Besides the token, we hardly store any data on the Bitcoin. We just use it for timestamping, right? So we timestamp the compensation request, and we timestamp the voting, and we timestamp. Well, I like to think as the Bisq is like another blockchain. So we timestamp like the blocks, but we don't store any information. So we just use mostly one function of the first layer, and all the rest is on the second layer, which is the P2P network.
Basically, yes. I mean, there is a small exception. That's the also voting is blind voting. So first you're in the voting phase, nobody knows what the other have voted. It's all encrypted. And the key, what you're using for encrypting your vote, will be revealed in the second transaction. And we are storing this, we are revealing this key in the transaction as well. So that's a small exception where we are putting other data beside hashes into it, but I think that's basically the only exception. Beside that, just bytes for determining which type of transaction it is and so something like this. But yeah, that's 1 byte. That's very cheap. And I think it's in big contrast to Ethereum, and I think that's one of the big conceptual problems. So when such DAOs and such models will succeed, and when you would imagine a future where basically every company and every project, it's not only commercial company, can be NGOs who are putting their organizational rules and execution on such DAOs. And when everything would be on the blockchain, it can never scale. I mean, that's impossible. And it's also the question why the whole world should execute something which is only relevant for a relative small group. I mean, in Bitcoin, we need it because, it's a global money system. But a DAO
usually is basically a DAO that just holds its own information. in the same way that the Bisq P2P network holds its own information.
Exactly, yeah. And the Bisq peer-to-peer network, of course, it will grow when there are millions and millions of Bisq users. Okay, then our peer-to-peer system will get into scalability issues, and we need to solve it. But that's our job and our data. We are not externalizing this to any other who has no relation to Bisq. And yeah, we are not externalize it to the core layer, like in Bitcoin in our case. And I think with Ethereum, yeah, everybody's putting this on the shared ledger, and I think that's a very weak point and a big problem.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I should point out that the same Bisq DAO can also be done with Ethereum. It's just that sometimes the fact that you work with a tool that doesn't give you all the options makes you look for a solution which is more optimized. Because if we would work with Ethereum, maybe we would also put very more stuff on the blockchain. I mean, if you think about it, we actually kind of put on Bitcoin blockchain everything that we can. So we are not trying to do colored coins in a second layer. We do it on the Bitcoin blockchain, and though right now there is, I think, this RGB proposal to make like colored coin in a second chain. But we really abuse Bitcoin as much as we can. We just cannot abuse it so much. So we have to work on the second solution, on the second layer.
Yeah, I think these restrictions are actually a feature and probably good pressure, like the fees. And in the early days of Bitcoin, a few years ago, when Mastercoin and all these color coin projects have bloated the blockchain a lot and put a lot of data in with some tricks, like in some multisig or some some non-intended usages for data, also not op return, which is kind of like their recommended way how to store non-transactional data in the blockchain. And it was possibly because the transaction fees were super low in this time, but last year when it was spiking, it became clear that this has no future. And at the moment, luckily, the transaction fees are quite low again, but we cannot hope that this will stay forever. And it also then Bitcoin will not succeed. When Bitcoin is successful, the transaction fee will be high. So you have to build with that in mind. And something like RGB is super interesting in future, and we might maybe change over to this when it's in production one day. But yeah, at the moment, on the Bitcoin side, I don't see any other technical solution. That's why we implemented our own model.
So I think we also we went for a solution which does not modify the Bitcoin, does not require any modification from the Bitcoin. We really focus on what happened on the Bisq side and use mostly timestamping for Bitcoin most days.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we cannot wait, like with side chains, we cannot wait until we get maybe a feature which will enable us in whatever years. I mean, we need it now, the DAO, and not in 10 years. And also, I mean, another reason why I didn't want to use any of our existing technologies is you get a lot of dependence and to this project, to this. Often it's run by companies, even if it's open source, you're basically depending on what they're implementing because they're driving the whole development, and you don't, like with Colu, for instance, you don't have the resources to compete with them when you want another feature or something different. And with implementing yourself, you're completely free and open to design exactly for the needs and tailor it for the use cases, what we need. And we see it already, like I mentioned, and get lost a little bit with these future ideas. And I mean, that's possible because at the end, it's just Java code, and you just need to find, and just under quotes, because that's the hardest part at the end, you need to find a secure consensus system, which is with the Bisq DAO voting and the compensation request, that this all works and that it's secure. It's not only technical challenges, it's a lot of conceptual challenges where you added a lot of very valuable input.
Thank you.
And I think when you can find such solutions, like for instance, this option trading or the off-chain trade protocol, so when we can find a conceptual, solid and secure system which combines different aspects of cryptography, of peer-to-peer network, of game theoretical incentives, of other features which are a little bit too complex to explain here. but which are basically related to our peer-to-peer network. When you can find such a solution, then yeah, you can implement it using the Bisq DAO, and it's basically only coded up in Java. It's not the yeah, there's no big hurdle.
Right. So I think that the DAO does 3 actions, which for me looks important. One of them is the voting, and it's not only voting on coins issuance, it's also a voting on decisions of the Bisq organizations. And the other one is burning an issuance of transactions, right? Burning an issuance of coin. And the last one, I mean, burning an issuance of coins is kind of equivalent to locking and unlocking, right?
Yeah, it's in a way a little bit related, or it has some, as well as bonding, has some similarities with multisig, which is basically a smart contract on Bitcoin. But multisig has a main problem that, yeah, you cannot distribute it to a huge group of key holders. Maybe with Schnorr signatures in future, it will be better and easier. But at the moment, you cannot do this. And then you always have a small group who is the kind of like the escrow. So when, for instance, we would use a normal multisig for securing arbitrators that they have to log in, and that was actually planned in the past always, that the arbitrators have to log in some security deposit, and then some Bisq contributors with very high reputation, other key holders. Yeah, then you're creating centralized elements at the end. This key holders become centralized element, then it's very inflexible.
So the multisig is limited with how many people can participate in the signature in Bitcoin, right? And if you do bonding, then it's much less. If you do bonding as an off-chain, then the number of participants is much bigger.
Yeah, it's basically the stakeholders. I mean, another thing is with multisig, you can steal the money. Also, the majority of the key holders could steal your money. With bonding, they only can burn. Also, the stakeholders can burn it. The trust model is that the BSQ stakeholders, and not only by stake, but by meritocracy, could make a majority attack basically on this bond and could destroy your money. So you are trusting this open system, which is not limited to numbers, and it's open and can change all the time. It's dynamic. You're trusting this group that they are not abusing this power as a super majority attack with 85%. Yeah, and that's a different security and trust model, like with multisig, where you're basically trusting the majority of the number of the keys what's needed for unlocking the multisig. And then with multisig, one very problematic issue is that you cannot transfer it. So when, for instance, there would be 3 key holders, and then one of this is leaving the project, and he should give over this key to somebody else. You cannot give the key to somebody else because you cannot prove that you have destroyed your key. So you have to recreate a new multisig. You have to transfer it, and that makes everything very complicated.
Yeah, multisig is a very strict process.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic that we have it, but it has its disadvantages and limitations.
Yeah, like everything. I think you spoke about the votings of the members all the time, and I think that maybe one difference that still a DAO have with a real organization is the case of conspiracy. Because one assumption that we have all the time for the DAO is that most of the contributors, most of the voters are honest. But if for some reason 90% of them, 95% of them decide to abuse me specifically as a participant, I have nothing to do against it.
Yeah.
While in a real world scenario, again, I can go to court and sue them. So that's maybe one.
Yeah, but I think that's a different
organization.
Yeah, I think people should be aware that there's no total security, and also, I mean, with the court, yeah, I mean, good luck to go against the central bank to court or against the government when you think and when they're really abusing their power, and they're doing it for. I mean, there are many cases in many countries. So it's also limited what you can do. It costs you a lot of money. There are financial limitations where you don't have maybe 100 millions to go to court against the central bank or whatever. But here it's basically, I said the majority attack. I mean, when the majority of the stakeholders, including this meritocratic aspect, is corrupt, then the project should be forked, and when you get scammed, then you should make a lot of negative fire to destroy Bisq and the Bisq DAO, because then they are corrupt and should be replaced by a better version. And when nobody cares about this, okay, then the world don't care about justice and about such values. Then they get what they get. It's all in the hand of the people at the end.
You're right. I think, I mean, I have a great hope for the whole concept of DAOs, and specifically the Bisq DAO. And I think that in the future, if it becomes like something with many participants, it will be very interesting to see how it develops in such a situation. In the same way that Bitcoin and Ethereum forks were, for me, a fascinating sociological and economical story to see how it develops. I cannot really forecast. So, I mean, I cannot tell what will happen in a situation when a person will feel abused by organization, because it's easy to say yell, but scream fire, but it's also easy to be labeled as a crazy person in the internet. I don't know. It's an interesting question. We want to speak about philosophy of DAOs. That's philosophy of DAOs.
Yeah, but I think that's actually the important aspect what we have to consider. It's not a perfect model which will stick forever like this. It's a progress, and the quality of this is in the hand of everybody who is contributing. That's first, of course, all the contributors to this, but also when you get abused by this and you don't care or don't put enough energy to try to change this. And that's basically the same what people in countries like Turkey. I mean, when nobody cares and go on the street and demonstrate against the corrupt fascist government, okay, then they live in a fascist, and they don't deserve much better because they don't care about it. When there are enough people who really care and fight and do what's in the possibilities, then it will be, then it's at least it's some power for a change. Maybe it takes many years and so, but I think it's at the end, it's a living process, everything. And what I mean, Bisq will always change and will have problems and maybe get forked someday. And the DAO, of course, need to evolve in future. I mean, all this current implementation of voting and this management is very, very simple and very limited. Maybe in future we need delegated voting, like liquid democracy and more sophisticated systems. But we have to start small. That's difficult enough, it can evolve in all this kind of.
I think we began with the issuing and compensation. That's a small step, but it's an important step. I was thinking what you said about Turkey. I know from other countries. I don't go to demonstrations because I like privacy, and I'm afraid of connecting. I mean, I'm relatively paranoid in this, and I'm really afraid to connect my political opinion to my human identity. I mean, I discuss it with people freely, but not so much in public settings. And this is something with a DAO that you can protest without connecting it to destroying your future. Of course, in the other ones, it also opens you up for trolling. So again, every coin has two sides. And regarding the decentralization, a very interesting step would be if the development of Bisq itself and the DAO becomes decentralized, because then you can tell people, do not protest, come and participate in the development.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical to recommend a system like the DAO for Bitcoin itself for the development process, because it just increases the attack surface, and it adds a lot of complexity and something big and where there's so much incentives to break it, like with Bitcoin. I think it's important to keep it as simple and as limited as possible. And I think it works good enough with this very anarchistic way how the governance work. I mean, it works basically like a DAO. It's just not
it has a structure of the Bitcoin governance, It's not completely unstructured. So the pull request and
there are some features but I think it's I think As I think it's important to make a distinction for which kind of project you're applying these systems. I mean, Bisq is similar like a company. It's a limited project. It's not a global money system like Bitcoin. So it has a different attack threat model. And I think adding this complexity and risk of the DAO to Bisq has, of course, its problems. And I'm a little bit scared also. I mean, when we fuck it up like the DAO, it can kill Bisq. So we have to be super careful.
I hope we are going to start smaller, so we are not going to be able to lose $150 million. I just hope so, yeah.
We are building in a lot of protection. That's one very important thing, as we code is not law. That's completely stupid. And as the DAO has proven, they didn't take it serious themselves. And it's the intention of the social group who are building something. It's a tool for getting something done. And when there would be a hack or when there would be a bug which creates a lot of damage, we try to fix it with however we can do it in the worst case to start over again and reissue and basically rewrite history. It's not a immutable system like Bitcoin. And it's intended to deliver the decentralized funding and management system for Bisq, and it's not intended as an immutable database.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a system for people to collaborate and giving you some sense of. I mean, I think has a very strong sense of security, but.
Yeah,
and the security is as immutable as possible, but of course we are not going to be, and it's a human thing. And whenever somebody goes into the Bisq DAO, they should know that there is a lot of human factor here. So it's a tool, much better than the centralized approach. We hope it's much better than the centralized approach, but it's a flexible tool.
I think that the trust model, and people have to be aware when they don't trust at all. These people who are building Bisq and who have to, who are owning the stakeholders, the future stakeholders, when they don't have any trust in those, then they should not use it. They should not take part of this. I mean, nobody's forced to use Bisq or to be part of the DAO. So it's based on this that you are trusted at least 85% or the majority of those stakeholders of these contributors have a positive reputation, that you assume that they are not killing their own project for an exit scam or whatever. And I think that's a trust situation.
Maybe one important thing to point out is that the Bisq DAO is the Bisq is going to work the same anyway, more or less. So I mean, even if the Bisq DAO is a failure, the Bisq is going to work because the decentralized software. And if you are there only for the tradings, you can ignore the Bisq DAO more or less. If you are a participant of the Bisq decentralized organization, distributed organization, then you think about the Bisq DAO and be active. So that's where it comes.
Yeah, it's true. So it's basically two separate projects. So it's not automatically when the Bisq DAO would blow up that it destroy all the Bisq, but the main problem will be that people lose confidence, and Bisq would probably lose a lot of reputation, and that will create a lot of damage as well. But of course, hopefully then that will never happen, and nobody knows how such thing will play out. But I think also, I mean, also with Bitcoin or with any other, you always have to be aware of the limitations. I mean, in Bitcoin, it's already quite a lot of security because there's so much money in. And so, but I mean, when the miners would make a 51% attack and don't care, and I mean, it happens with smaller proof of work chains, they got killed and they got attacked. Even the incentive, the game theoretical incentives that you say that the miners don't want to destroy their investment, that only works for certain scenarios when they can make a short and can make more money on this side. I mean, it has happened and it has its limitations. And when you don't trust this setup, like in Bitcoin, you should not use Bitcoin. And when you don't trust the Fed, then you should not use US dollar. I mean, there's no perfect security and there's no trustlessness. So just trust minimized, and it's a scale.
So, I mean, I think we should start to finish soon. But what is the next step for the DAO? So what's the next thing that is going to happen for the Bisq DAO?
With the next release, which is planned mid to end of October probably. That will be, by the way, a quite big release with rebranding and with the release of the Bisq DAO for testnet. Sorry, So people can play around, can learn about it, and we make very short intervals. Usually this whole cycle with voting and compensation requests is 1 month, but for the test phase, we want to make it very short, a few days, so you can play it or play around with it without waiting too long. And of course, help testing, help to find improvements before we launch. When everything goes good with this test, we hope that we can launch to end of the year, more or less, on mainnet. And another thing which probably will be added in this release will be the APIs. Another big feature, so market makers who want to use trading bots or build their own scripts for trading can do more with Bisq. And when you're a developer, we are always looking for developers. We're always short on development resources. When you're
in Java, right?
Yeah, it's Bisq is all in Java. When you're not very familiar with with the latest Java versions, and I have only had Java in universities 10 years ago, please give it a try again. It's much more modern, like it was back then with Java 4 or Java 6. So now it's a lot of functional programming features and so on, and it's actually a pretty solid language for. So I'm pretty happy that we have chosen Java.
Right, it's okay. I'm not going to bash Java now, so don't worry.
And yeah, when you're a developer, we are super happy if you can join us. There's a lot of work to be done in many different areas. There are also a lot of small tasks where you don't need to understand the whole system, where you can start with small items. And if you're more a conceptual person, there's a lot of ideas, but at the moment we don't have the resources to develop these ideas and to get this to a defined concept to be ready to get implemented. If you're more a social person or so, you can help to spread the word. Many things to do. Very exciting how this develops. It's already quite a big community, quite a lot of momentum. It's a very interesting experiment on the social level also, how this plays out, that people are working so freely, so permissionlessly, so transparent together, and so far it works pretty good. If you're up for fun, let's join Bisq.
Yeah, maybe I should contribute my point of view, because I come from the academy, or at least I was in the academy many years now. I would say that I consulting and do lots of independent research. And if you are from computer science and you're curious about consensus algorithms, I think that Bisq DAO consensus algorithm is a very interesting one. And I mean, so it's because of Manfred, who did have lots of interesting ideas there. It will be great for us also if someone who is interested in such things take a look and look for mistakes and problems. So personally, if it's something which you are from the theoretical side, interested in consensus algorithms, jump to our Slack and maybe even send me a message or leave us something, and we'll be happy to speak about it.
Yeah, and I think from my experience with people who are working or coming from the academic side, I mean, there's a lot of super interesting stuff going on in research projects, but one of kind of like disappointing and frustrating element is that most of those projects will never be used in real life. And because, people are developing something and then there is nobody who is really bringing this to production and doing the hard work to get it, to make it usable, to test it, to support it. It's a long process from a concept to a working
we are way too
project
busy to do that. Yeah.
And with Bisq, with their exchange, we have managed this already. It's online since 2.5 years, and it's developing pretty good. And with the Bisq DAO, we are starting now. I mean, we are using it already, not conceptually since a year. So people are doing these requests, and we are issuing these tokens on a spreadsheet, as it's not technically and not decentralized at the moment. But conceptually, we are practicing this already, and it works pretty well. And so the social experience, the organizational experiment, is already happening since a year and has not failed so far. And actually looks pretty promising that it's from the basics, the basic elements are all correct. And now it's the technical implementation to get it trust minimized and decentralized on the blockchain and in the peer-to-peer network. And yeah, getting this working, I think, would be a very interesting prototype for many other projects. And I'm personally much more interested not to create so kind of like decentralized companies like Bisq. I mean, yeah, we are earning trading fees, so it's more like a revenue-based model where there is some revenue and can distribute this. So it's a capitalist model at the end where there's some money which gets distributed and people can earn something. But I think there are many very interesting and very important projects like Wikipedia or WikiLeaks or many NGOs, which doesn't fit to the traditional financial models. Yeah, you cannot take fees for reading articles on Wikipedia or whatever. That all doesn't work. So there will not be a revenue model. But I think and I hope that with DAOs there will be alternative models where people who are adding values to such projects are represented as stakeholders with a coin, with a token. And this token can be used for management, for governance, voting, for instance. And this token will become automatically valuable as soon as there's one person out in the world who is willing to pay anything for this token. It has a value, a non-zero value, and I think that's unavoidable, that there is some crazy fan of Wikipedia who will pay $1 for such a token. And at this moment, it's a financial asset. And then the contributors have basically, they get paid in shares at the end. Then they are stakeholders, they can sell their tokens and can make their living. And then it becomes an economic model. And then we have an alternative to donation or crowdfunding or whatever, which all doesn't work well, as we know.
Yeah, so, I'm not a fan. So I think, Manfred, we should do when the Bisq compensation model starts working, we can do a talk about financial model for open source projects.
Yeah, that's for me. Maybe after when Bisq doesn't need me anymore, I would like to move a little bit in this direction. That's for me much more interesting, like the pure trading and financial stuff.
I mean, I'm also a trader, so it's okay.
But the good thing is, having this revenue model and this clear economic model makes everything much easier. I mean, to start with, the other is more risky. It could fail easier, and bootstrapping is always a big problem. Maybe everything is perfect, but there are just not enough people convinced to use it, and you never bootstrap, and it fails by this. And when there are already projects which have proven that it can work, then bootstrapping such new projects which have it harder from their structure will be hopefully easier as well.
Okay. So
let's maybe
thank you for inviting me. It was lots of fun.
Yes, thanks a lot for your interesting input and all what you have done already in the past, and hopefully you continue in the future.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I'm pretty sure I will.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to, I mean, it's a quite difficult and complex area, and it's very new. And for myself, I got surprised all the time that I found out new aspects and understood new aspects, and still probably don't understand a lot of the aspects. The same happened actually with Bitcoin for me. And I think, such discussion, what we had already in the past privately often, helps a lot to get a better understanding, to see more the real structure, what these systems can do, what's the limitations, what are future possibilities, what's the new features which are different, like what we have at the moment. I mean, mostly when there's something new, like with the internet, people try to make analogies to traditional system, like the mail system, email. Okay, it's a alternative to the traditional mail. But I mean, the internet has created so much new stuff which was not possible and didn't exist before, and that's really the killer stuff, the killer app stuff. And I think with DAOs, of course, you can see it like a company with public shares or whatever.
I think you can have a new kind of human structures, human social structures.
Yeah, exactly.
And this would be interesting.
Yeah, and I think it can develop much, much more. Like we see at the moment, we are just touching the surface and getting a little bit to the limits of transforming the traditional system to a modern 21st century systems, which are not based on bureaucratic entities who are controlling way too much, trusted third parties, and using cryptography and IT. Or,
this is the autonomous part of a DAO, so it's independent of the rest of the things around it.
Yeah. And yeah, let's see how this develops. Look, everything is quite exciting.
I completely agree. Okay. So it was a pleasure.
Yes, thanks a lot for taking your time and having this interesting discussion. And we will continue with such sessions about the DAO. Probably the next will be to show the UI, which will be then public on testnet, to give a more concrete idea how it really works, how to make the full cycle of compensation requests and votings. And then at the fourth session, probably will be more technical session where we explain more really the technical details. That's probably more intended for developers or people who know the basics of Bitcoin pretty well. And yeah, let's make a stop here and see you next week again.
Okay, goodbye, Manfred.
Goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.